So,
Okay.
yeah. So for those who are confused as to what Dwayne or whoever's recording.
Yep. It's recording.
Cool. So welcome to, what's the date today? 25th of April. I'm here in the sunny Toronto on this Saturday morning. Today we're actually going to be looking into web components. So who has heard or knows what web components are? Why would we need something like this? All right. So web components, I want to share my screen. People have heard React before, right? Who's heard of React? That's pretty much everyone these days. So, you know, we've got React, and React is advertises itself as a JavaScript library for building user interfaces, and it's excellent. It's a really good library. For those who've been around code mentoring for a while, you'll know that we use React everywhere in what we do. But I'm just curious, you know, what other technologies are there to solve this problem? And that's a question that a lot of people have asked, because, you know, they might not necessarily like the way React looks or works, that you have to transpile it. A number of years ago, there was a working group in HTML, the WCAG group, or I forget exactly, combination of the likes of Mozilla and Google and Apple and a few other people. They got together and said, hey, like, we should probably come up with an open standard for creating components. So React advertises itself as component-based. That's kind of, it really pushed into the community, especially the front-end community, this idea of building components, you know, modular components that you put together, self-contained. They kind of do their own thing. But there wasn't really a native way of doing this. And when I mean native, I mean without a framework, not pulling in a big library like React or Angular or Vue, back in the day, like jQuery. So they said, right, we should probably try and fix this. So they came out with this specification. It's taken many, many years to sort of really get caught up to modern browsers. They've gone through a couple of versions, but this is what's called web components. Another name for it is custom elements. It's probably a bit more understandable for those who have just come from the HTML space. You know, we write. Let me just load up a code window for you. Zoom in. We write a lot of HTML elements, right? We know HTML really well. We've got the body, we've got input fields, we've got forms, we've got heaps of stuff, right? ULs. But what if we actually wanted to write our own element? Or what if we wanted to extend this and to say, you know, I want to have some custom stuff. It's a pretty common thing in you know, a lot of other contexts. Like if you come from a Java background or a Swift background, like writing these custom elements is a very common thing. So why can't we do this in HTML and in JavaScript? And for a long time, you couldn't. That's why they invented languages like React, frameworks like React and Angular. So that's kind of why we want a custom web component, is to actually come in and say, I want to define this, and then, you know what would be really cool is if I could somehow bundle this up and give it to somebody else, and so somebody else could use that component. Kind of like, yeah.
Do you have an example of what a custom, like what a limitation on those
question.
elements are? Like what example of, like, oh yeah, I really need this HTML element.
A really good example might be something like a date picker, right? Like a date picker example.
So if you want to give a date, you might have some little
yeah. So we don't really have one.
Calendar. Okay.
So this is built in jQuery. But something like this, right? This might be a good example of a date picker. I actually built one recently, if you'll indulge me. I built one for work recently. What did I call this project? The song space. This was a audio player that I built. So kind of like what you see in Spotify down the bottom, down here. So this kind of thing with the play bar and the volume control and whatnot. So this might be like a really nice element. Another good example of that is on SoundCloud. So, you know, having this control down the bottom here, right? You might decide, I actually want to make this available for other people to embed SoundCloud songs and have like a player sitting on their website. Like I might decide on my website, I want to show off some of the music that I've created, and I want to actually have that element down the bottom. So SoundCloud might decide, you know, I want to make this as a web component. They can just put onto their thing. And this is the nice thing about web components, guys, is they don't require a framework. There's no requirements necessary. You just include the JavaScript that's required, and then just use that tag on your page. So that's kind of the benefit of these web components, and that's why they're what we call native, in that they don't need to be compiled in React or in Vue or in Angular. You grab the JavaScript and you put it straight on your page, and that's a really nice thing to have. There's a good list or like a directory of web components that people are making under webcomponents.org. You can kind of have a look through here and see, you know, what people are doing. Like if we choose like a date picker, for example, date carousel. There you go. So you just install it, right? Just basically add the JavaScript to your page, and then you just use it like this. That's the really nice thing about it. It doesn't require any frameworks. So that's kind of why and what it looks like and why we'd want it. Does that kind of make sense so far, team? Like why we want something like this? Can you guys see the benefit and how useful this would be?
Tristan.
Mm-hmm.
So say we are using a framework like React, right, for our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then say I want a date picker like this, right?
Yep.
So even in that, I can include it like this.
That's correct. So that's actually what I've done with this component player example. So under the player, I think it's dev. Maybe not. Might be a bit broken. We'll see. So we use React at work, and we'll also use. There we go. It's just started playing some music. Where is it? Sorry, the song just came on. So we use React on the for the project that I'm building, but we also use Ember.js. And so we wanted to have this component used across both, because if I write it in React, I can't use it in Ember. If I write it in Ember, I can't use it in React. So that's why I built this component. So this actually loads up this thing you see down the bottom here. Try and zoom in. I can actually seek through the song. You can see it's sending out some events. For some reason, the icons aren't working. There's like a little volume control as well. This is an example of a web component, and I actually use this inside a React context, and I don't have to worry about, you know, rebuilding it each time in each project. So that's a really good use case. Is actually using it inside React, and they do play nicely together. There are a couple of caveats, but yes, you can definitely use it in React. So, any other questions before we jump into how to actually build one? Any other questions on why we need this, or what it is, what it's used for?
And is it like highly compatible with all browsers?
Yeah, it is. So web components support. I know they have a polyfill for it as well. Polyfills. So they've got polyfills, and there you go. browser support. So unless you're using Internet Explorer, which they do have a polyfill for, web components are, I should actually specify, web components is actually a collection of these technologies. Today, we're going to be focusing on custom elements and Shadow DOM, and I'll explain that as we jump in. Una says, can we create a smiley rating system to rate a page using 3 types of emojis using the web component? That is such a good suggestion that is actually what we're going to build today. I really like that, Una. Thank you. That's exactly what we're going to do. In fact, I think I've already seen some web components for this. So I'm imagining it's like a really sad face, and then we have like a somewhat sad face, then a neutral face, then a smiley face, and then an ecstatic face. All right, excellent. Let's go and do that. So you guys interested to see how we do this? All right, we're all following? All right, whip out your code editor, team, because we're all going to be doing this. And I'm not checking the chat now while I jump into the code, guys. So if you have something to say, please turn on your microphone and talk, because otherwise I won't really be checking it.
Yeah, if you pause for questions anytime, Chris and I can read out the chat. But
no worries.
Otherwise, I'll just let you continue. So if anyone has
if there's any questions, shout it out.
Shout it out. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, please turn on your microphones. We do kind of advertise this as an interactive webinar, and that's what it is. Like, this is not a lecture or anything. So definitely jump in. Cool. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to open up a new folder. Actually, I've already got one here. Just going to delete everything I've got so far. All right. Let's get started, team. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a index.html page. And just set up a standard thing. For those who don't know how to do this, this is a really good tip. If your syntax is set to HTML, you just press exclamation mark and then press tab. It'll automatically fill that out for you. It just saves running through some of that stuff. So we'll call this a rating system, web component. I really love this idea, Una. This is Una. Sorry, this is a really a fun idea. So let's define what we want this to look like. All right. How do we actually want this to be? So there's a rule. This is important. There is a rule when you're creating a custom element, and the name of your element must have a dash inside of it. This is a requirement. Can anybody tell me why you think we need a dash inside the element? What I mean by that is my dash element. Like this. This is not available. We can't do this, my element. Can anybody tell me why? Have a stab.
Separated from other components?
Other HTML elements, yep.
Elements, yeah.
That's exactly right. So this is a custom element, right? So what do we want to call this? Since Una came up with this idea, we're going to let you decide on what we want to call this element. So you tell us.
Smile.
A smile, all right? But remember, it has to have a dash in it. So smile rating, smile dash rating.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's do that.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Let's do it. So smile dash rating. Just gonna move this Zoom window for a second. All right. Smile dash rating. So this is what we want it to look like. We're not going to put anything inside of it. Do we want to have any options, any attributes that we pass in? Let's keep it simple for now, right? Let's keep it very, very simple. Now I'm going to create another file, call it index.js. Now here, I'm going to just write pure JavaScript. There's no React. There's no transpilation. We're not going to use Webpack. We're going to keep it very, very basic. Okay. So I'm going to create, this is how you define a custom element, is with a class. We're going to go class smile rating extends HTML element. Like that. Is that big enough for you guys? You guys can see this? So we're just defining a simple class like this. And then the last thing we need to do is go window dot custom elements dot define. And this takes two options. This takes the name, all right, the name. So we're going to copy this. And then it takes the class, smile rating. And that is it. Nothing else. That is all you need to do. So let's try this. We have to obviously link this script in, so we'll do that down the bottom. src equals index.js. Let's rename this to smile rating. There we go. And I'm simply just going to load this up in my browser. Copy path, open up in Chrome. Okay, so there is nothing on the page. Well, there is, technically. This guy is actually sitting here, but it's not doing anything yet. And that's because we haven't told it to. So for those who have used class-based React components, there's a thing called the component lifecycle. Who knows what this is? Who can tell me what a lifecycle is? Or for those who don't know, have a guess. What is a lifecycle?
Tristan, it's like entire cycle from where the component load gets mounted onto the page until it can get updated until it gets destroyed.
Right. So it's kind of like the stuff we learned in primary school, right? This
Yeah.
is the cycle of life, and you go through the whole thing of the animal kingdom, and they are born from an egg, or they grow up, and eventually they grow wings, and they fly, and they get food, and they have babies, and then they die. Like the whole process of moving through everything, right? Same with the component. It's born, right? It gets created, then something puts it on the page, right? So that's another one. And then maybe you take it off the page, and then maybe you put it back on the page, and then you destroy it, right? You reload the entire website. So this is an example of a life cycle. And what we can do is we can hook into this. So Shane asks, do normal HTML elements have a life cycle too, or just custom components? I believe they do internally.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that whenever you pause in one to take you on a tangent, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Thanks for getting that.
I'm pretty sure they have the same events. So because we're extending from HTML element, we actually can hook into all the standard events that you'd get. So on click, on change, all that sort of stuff, that all comes from the HTML element. Okay, so what we're going to do is we actually need, let's test something, right? When the component is put onto the page, we want to send an alert message. So I have a thing called disconnected. Yeah, exactly. Let's have a look on the actual life cycle. So web components life cycle. So MDN has some pretty good documentation on this. And where are we? Using the lifecycle callbacks. So this here kind of outlines what we have available to us. Connected. This is the one we're going to use first. All right, connected callback. try this. Right. Alert a message when the element put on the page. And I will be putting all this up on GitHub, so don't be worried if you're not following along.
Yeah, just to clarify, will we just kind of watch this and then we'll all work together at the end, or
I suggest you guys go through this with me. I'm trying to type as slow and do this as slow as possible, and I will intermittently post up this code on Slack. But I do recommend that you definitely follow along, and this will all be posted on GitHub and also YouTube at the end as well.
Is there a particular editor we should have, or can we any text editor of our choice?
You can use anything. I personally love VS Code, but anything that is a text editor that has good support for syntax highlighting. But you can use anything. As I mentioned, we're only working with 2 files here, guys. We're not doing anything fancy. Great. Okay, so as you can see, I reload this page, and we're getting an alert message. That's it. That's all we're doing. We're not doing anything fancy here. So you can see, like, there's no transpilation, there's Webpack, there's no React, there's nothing. There's 2 files, index and a little JavaScript class. That's it. And this is the nice, I personally find very refreshing thing about web components, is that there isn't really a lot to learn. It's very simple, but it gives you a lot of the power behind things like React. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some styling or some content to this, right? We want to have these 3 emojis, these 5 emojis. So I want to introduce a new concept to you guys. If we go back to webcomponents.org, I mentioned before today that web components is actually a collection of multiple technologies. So what we just did is we wrote a custom element here. See, window.custom elements. That's what this is. I want to introduce a new concept called the shadow DOM. Now, outside of sounding like something from Lord of the Rings, all right, what is the shadow DOM? Anybody heard of this before? And no, it doesn't make you a hacker.
Is
Hacking in the shadows.
The virtual DOM that React keeps track of the changes and then does the diff of the actual DOM and the shadow DOM and does the changes.
Yeah, kind of. So yeah, for those who don't know the inner workings of React, there's a thing called the virtual DOM, and React in memory in JavaScript has a map of pretty much every component that lives inside the React environment, and it makes changes that way. Now, the shadow DOM is the custom element or the web component approach to the DOM. And when I refer to the DOM, I'm talking about the elements, the things that actually live on the page. DOM stands for Document Object Model, right? It's the things that live inside. This is your DOM structure, right? The Russian dolls kind of thing, right? Boxes inside boxes inside boxes inside boxes. So shadow DOM is a variation of this. It's a special sort of addition in that, and it has a couple of properties that they behave differently to the outside world. So let's delve into this. I'm going to start off with not using the shadow DOM. Okay. So what I'm going to do is inside when it first gets connected, right? I want to go this.inner.html, right? And in here we can actually define some HTML. So let's do this. I'm going to use a template tag, so we can use multiple lines. And let's have our UL. All right. close that off. And then let's have these list items and then have the emojis inside of them. So let's find the sad one. Maybe the angry. All right. That's pretty good.
Hey Tristan, how do you get that window up there?
So I don't know in Windows, but on Mac, it's Control Command Space. If you go up to here and you go, maybe go help and then emoji. Emojis and symbols. So under edit, emojis and symbols. That's actually for most programs inside Mac. Windows, I don't know. You'll have to find that if somebody knows what the Windows command
I'll
is.
figure it out. Thanks.
Yeah. Windows key plus period. There you go. In Windows. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
All right. So we got the angry one. All right. We're gonna have the slightly angry one, like a disgruntled. All right. Frowning face. That doesn't come through properly. So let's hope this works. Then we're going to have a neutral face. And then we're going to have a slightly smiling face. And then we're going to have a very happy face. All right. So what have we done? All we're doing is, let's comment this out because that alert message is going to get very annoying. And we'll actually remove this line and we'll say set the inner HTML, right, or the template, if you will, when the page loads. Or sorry, when the page loads, when the component is put or inserted into the DOM. Just going to check that chat because I know someone's chatting. If you can't find the emojis, just use,
okay.
yeah,
I'll let you know if there's anything coming up.
No worries. Okay, so let's try this, right? Let's go back over here and refresh. Boom. Right? So we really haven't done anything too fancy here. We just created this little template. Now, somebody might say, Tristan, this looks quite ugly. All right, how do we remove these list item styles? We're going to have this side by side. Okay, well, let's add some styling to this. All right, use a style tag. Say in here, list item or UL. We'll just say, now we'll make it list item, display inline block. This. There we go. All right. So I'm going to introduce a problem. Before I do that, do we have any questions on anything we've covered so far? You can actually see this inner HTML here. This is what we've created.
So Tristan?
Mm-hmm.
So in this, is using inner HTML the only way to write the whole HTML of the component, or we can have separate HTML or CSS files for that?
Great question. I will get to that in a second. That is a great question. No, the answer is no. There are multiple ways. In fact, that's a good segue into what I was about to introduce. All right, you're seeing here this style. Does this style apply to just this element, or does it apply to the entire page?
Just that element.
Are you sure? Let's have a look. How about, all right, we have our shopping list. All right, H1. Items to stock up on in Corona times. Right. Li, gotta have some bread, milk. All right, there's some chicken. All right, now if I refresh this page, right, before I do, what do we think, team? Do we think it's going to be a normal list, or do we think it's going to be side by side? Does this apply to just this element, or does it apply to everything right now? Who can tell me?
To everything.
I say side by side.
You say side by side? Someone, yep, so people reckon it's going to be everything. Remidos has asked, privately, what browser am I using, sorry? I am using Chrome. Personally, I actually prefer Brave because it doesn't track me, but I use Chrome a lot for development. Nadia says list. All right, here's the big reveal. So we can, in fact, confirm that this style is now applying to everything. I'll prove it. I'll delete it. So that is a problem. That is a problem for us because we could be pulling in these components from anywhere. Anybody can write a custom element, and all you have to do is import some JavaScript and put it on the page. And we don't know what styles those components are going to have. They might accidentally use the same class name as us. That could be terrible. It could destroy the look of our entire page. So, enter the shadow DOM. The shadow DOM is a way of attaching a special DOM, a special unique part of HTML inside our custom element that doesn't leak. What does leak mean? It means that styles don't leak out like they're doing here. And also styles don't leak in. So it's very powerful. What it does is it essentially resets the CSS inside the context of the shadow DOM. This is a very, very powerful technique. So how do we go about doing this? It's actually very easy. So in here, we've set this.innerHTML. We're going to change this ever so slightly. All right? Sherry asks, is it just for web components? Yes, it is. I believe, actually, that's not true. I think you might be able to create it. But if you do it in other elements, the browser already has its own version of this. For example, let me show you a standard input field in HTML. If we inspect this, you see this? Right. This is a root. This is just a standard HTML element, right? But inside, right, the browser is actually doing its own thing. So Sherry, if you do attach stuff, I don't know if you can, but if you did, you might start breaking some default browser behavior. If that makes sense. But that is a great question. Does that answer your question? Okay. Great. Sweet. Thanks, Sherry. Okay, so that's kind of what this shadow root does. Is it says things don't get out and things don't go in. So let's create one for our own component that we're writing. So to do this, and the reason why we can do this is because we're extending from the HTML element. We can say this.attach shadow, and we're going to call it. Now it takes an option, right? Mode. Now mode can either be closed or open. Now this slightly changes the behavior of how the CSS, how you can access this. If it's closed in JavaScript, you can't go inside of it like this. If it's open, you can. So you can open this up inside JavaScript. In our case, we're going to keep it as closed. You can read more up on that later. It's not too important, to be honest. Let me just add a little comment on that. Can I access side shadow DOM with JS? Yes, no. Open equals yes. Now, instead of going this.innerHTML, let's actually do this. Let's so you see that I've attached the shadow now. So you actually see the shadow root. But our HTML that we added, the inner HTML, is missing. It's actually not showing up anymore. Let me just remove this input element just to clear it up. And these we'll keep it there for now. All right, it's disappeared. Even though it's sitting inside here, look. The UL is still here with all the emojis, but it's disappeared. What's going on?
Is it like the fact that it's closed is stopping the HTML coming out?
No. So this is a really powerful part of web components, is that you can actually put things in them. And when you create a shadow root, you can tell, so you can create a very complex structure. It's kind of like in React. You know how in React, when you want to put something inside a component, you have to, in the template, you have to put children. You have to say, put the children inside here, right? If you have a button, for example, or a page component, you have to, somewhere inside your template, put props.children to tell React, this is where the children get inserted. It's the exact same concept inside the shadow DOM. It's called a slot. Right? So you can slot something inside here.
So smile rating is the parent, and then the UL is a child.
That's correct. So it's the exact same concept. Now, in our case, right, we're not actually going to be putting anything inside the smile rating. We're not gonna put things inside here. We want smile rating to live on its own. So in that case, we can actually change this. So instead of adding this to the inner HTML, we're going to go this.shadowroot.innerHTML. So the shadow was created with this. And now instead of updating the normal HTML, we're updating the shadows HTML. Does that make sense, team? So Remedios asks how to use a different style for list aside from the bullets. That's a great CSS question. We can get into that into the what if section. We'll have that towards the end. So I'll show you guys how to use different. But if you want to have a look for yourself, I think it's list style. Okay, so now let's check to see if the content comes back. All right, it hasn't quite. Wonder why that is. Did not set property inner HTML of null. Thought that's how you did it. Just gonna have a look on there and here. Thought that was how you had that in. Let's have a look on another website. Got a couple of questions here. Yeah, VS Code, Rajat. Oh yeah, sorry. Create shadow. Create shadow. No, or attach shadow. What's it called? Yeah. Mode open. Shadow root. HTML. Not sure why that's doing that. Maybe try const shadow equals.
Tristan?
Yep.
Yeah, Dennis says in the chat that if the mode is open, then it shows.
If it's open, we can do that. All right, let's have a look. See, I'll just try what I did there, and then if that doesn't work, okay. So I think I was using something from a different, because there's component libraries for web components. So sorry, team. The shadow root I don't think was a way of working on that. What I've done here is I've just assigned the shadow. So what I'll do here is I'll go shadow root is a shadow root. Oh, we don't have TypeScript, that's right. And then I'll just go this dot shadow root equals. Do that. I think you have to actually assign it. I just forgot that little step. So there we go. So this dot shadow root equals attach shadow. So we create that shadow, and now we're just assigning the inner HTML like that.
Tristan, can you explain once again what went wrong there? And
yeah, so I thought when I'm going to remove this, right? So I thought that by doing this dot attach shadow, it automatically added the shadow root for us. But I think we actually have to assign it like this. I think that was that issue. I don't know why. I thought it did, but I suppose it doesn't automatically. But that's just an easy way of attaching that shadow.
And that attach shadow mode, it's like open by default, so you have.
I think it is open by default, but we're gonna set it to closed. It doesn't really matter too much, to be honest. What other questions do we have? The video says, can I please request a recording for the full session after? Yes, we'll be recording this video. Yes, this is all going to be on YouTube. Okay. So, just fix that back up. Not assign. Oh, okay, maybe not. We'll try the open then. Somebody said open. Okay, yep, there you go. That's what the problem was. So thank you. Who found that? I think that was.
According to my VS Code.
Okay, great.
Awesome. In closed, the shadow root returns null. And then
okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. So that's how we set that through that. So this dot shadow root when it's open. I think if it is closed, let's just try and set it to something else, like shadow, not a this dot shadow, because you can't override a read-only property. But if we just try shadow like this, see if this works. Just as an experiment. That does work too. So we might try that because we do want to keep it closed, and we can just assign that as another shadow. Shadow. Set it to null initially, and we'll go this dot shadow, this dot shadow. Private. We'll leave that for now. Okay. So, any questions on how? Oh, and the other thing we'll note. What do you guys notice?
Yeah, styles are being correctly applied.
Styles are correct for this one, and they're also correct this one. And that is because this style tag that we see inside here does not leak outside of the shadow root. And that is one of the major benefits of using this shadow root concept. So Jeff asks, what is a use case that you might run into that you can use Shadow DOM for? Exactly this, Jeff, is that it allows you to encapsulate the style so that it doesn't leak outside. So that if you add a class, like a very common class, let's just say UL class equals list, right? If I give this component to you, right, you don't have to worry about that .list class affecting your, say you in your app, right? You also have a class list. That's not going to affect it. So as someone who's writing components, as a component author, I don't have to worry about leaking or affecting other people's code in the context of where it's included. Another thing is, as I mentioned earlier, is that slot. So where you have the template, the Shadow DOM template, you can define a really big complex thing and then put a slot so that when you put something inside the smile rating or in your web component, it goes into a specific location. If we have time today, I'll actually jump into named slots because you can actually pass multiple things into multiple locations. And that's a more advanced tutorial. We'll get into that a little bit later. But for now, let's continue on with what we're doing. Any other questions so far?
Hey, Tristan, yeah. Did you add a shadow root or a shadow DOM to another element before this?
So I think Una asked the same question. You mean to like default elements?
Yeah, I think you had a shadow root on a default element.
No, that's automatic. So the browser does that automatically.
That's what I missed. I just wasn't sure about that. So
yeah, so that's the automatic browser.
Okay, so the browser. Could you explain that one again? Just how the browser puts an automatic shadow root on those elements.
So Chrome or any browser itself, if we have the input field is a good example. Right, let's say input color. Right, this here, if we inspect this, you'll actually see all this stuff lives inside the Shadow DOM. So that's the browser automatically doing that for us. We're not writing this. This is the browser. Does that answer your question, Shane?
Yeah, that was great. So yeah, there's actually a lot of stuff inside the input.
Yeah, it's very commonly used.
Wasn't aware of.
Yeah, I think Mozilla Firefox, like all of their settings pages and everything, uses custom elements. I think Chrome is moving to that as well.
Sweet, yeah, cool.
It's really cool. Yeah, great. So why don't we have a system so that when these are when there's nothing selected, these are like 50% opacity, and then when we've clicked on one, that's you can see which one we've selected. So we'll set that in our CSS. We'll say list item, and we'll say opacity 0.2. Maybe that's a little bit too. So 0.4. Yeah. So we haven't selected one yet. And then if we have one that's open or clicked, right, li.active, we'll say opacity 1. And we'll just test that by adding a class on the happy one. Class equals active. Great. So how do we go about, right? How do we go about clicking and adding events on these? So we're just going to use some plain old HTML, CSS, JavaScript. No frameworks, nothing fancy. All right? We're going to go, yeah, let's do this. We'll do buttons. So what I'm going to do is actually expose a getter. I'm going to go get, right, underscore buttons. I'm going to go this dot shadow root dot query selector all, and I'm going to go li. That is a simple way of getting our buttons, right? Obviously, need to return that. So I'm going to go this dot buttons dot for each. Now, who can tell me actually? Can we actually do a for each on this? This is actually a little bit of a trick.
think
Who knows?
that you can do for each one, right?
You actually have to convert it into an array.
Yeah.
Because it's a strange one. I don't quite know why. This actually doesn't return an array. It returns like an element list. And it doesn't have the for each, which is a bit strange. So very easily, we can do this with array.from. Right? Convert from element list to array. So we can loop. All right. So we're going to loop over these buttons for each, right? We're going to add an event listener to them. We're going to have an on-click event listener. When I click on this, we want to set this to active. Make sense? This is going to be the li. I'm going to say li.add event listener. Right, click. And let's have another method here. We'll call it choose. And maybe what we should do is have a class for each of these with the type that it is. So class equals the response. So say this one equals or maybe we'll do data ID. That might be a bit easier. Data value. Right. We'll say this one is -2. This one we'll say is -1. This one is 0, so it's just neutral. This is a positive response, and this is a really positive response. Right. So what we're going to do in here is we want to say this dot, and we're going to create a new option for this. We're going to call it this dot value equals li dot get attribute data value, like this, and we'll turn that into an integer. Parse int, like this. So let's just stop for a second. Okay, so we're looping. Once we've created this structure, right? We're looping over all the LIs, and we're adding an event listener. So we're saying when we click on this, right? When we click on one of these guys, do something. And what we're doing is we're saying this dot value equals parse int, right? So we're turning this value into an integer. So every time we click on one of these, the value is going to be between -2 and 2. So let's actually have a look at this. I'm going to go back here and refresh. Right, currently, if I go grab this guy, we get an error. Query selector all of null. This dot, that's because we have turned that into a shadow. This dot shadow. There we go. Okay, so currently, if we go to this guy, now for those who don't know this is actually a really good trick inside Chrome DevTools. Whenever I click on a component, we'll actually see it has this equals 0 next to it. Does anybody know what that means? What it actually means is inside our console, if I go $0, that actually refers to the element that we last clicked on. In fact, it's got history. So if you go $1, $2, so this is actually the history of all the things that I clicked on inside here. It's a really nice way of working with the elements. So this is $0 is our custom element, and we're going to dot value. Right, currently undefined. So if we click on one of these guys, now we see the dot value. We can see the value is 2 by the nature of us assigning it here. So we clicked on data value 2. What if we click on the angry one? What is it now? -2. Pretty cool. All right. Pretty cool. What do you guys think so far? Any questions so far?
Tristan, could you just go back to the code and just give us a run through of the code?
Yeah.
Just the.
So
we've got a. So just the. You can see we've got the. So the shadow listener and the HTML. So I've got that, and then we've added this the add event listener.
Yep.
So the buttons. So this is a function, or did you created a function called _buttons?
No. So remember, the buttons was this getter. So
right.
retrieve this, right? So retrieve the list of emoticons or emojis.
Okay, so
right.
So getter is just basically returning some value, and this underscore, is that like a convention? You put underscore at the beginning.
Underscore is because this is sort of like a private, a private one, in that we don't want this to be accessed. So that's a standard convention inside JavaScript, in that if you don't want this to be accessed outside, you put an underscore on it.
Okay, so okay, cool. And that's returning the array of the list. Okay, and then that comes down to the for each. You add the listener, and then that's where you can actually click on each emoji now, because you've got this event listener. And what that does is it assigns a value.
Yep. So
okay,
when you click on an emoji, right, grab the
data value attribute. Yep. Okay.
Data value that we've defined in our template here. Attribute. And assign as the value of the component. Like this. Pretty cool, right?
Tristan, question. Yeah. So on top, I noticed like you have a variable underscore shadow, right? On top.
Yep.
Yeah. So is there any reason we are not using like a const or let? Is it like a global or something?
No, it's a property of this class.
Oh yeah, got it. Yeah.
So this is specific to this class, and that's a class property or a class attribute.
Hey Tristan, there's a question from Iuna. So the click results that we were looking at in the browser.
Yeah, so she wants to post them to something.
Yeah, is there a way to record them and export them?
That's a great question for the what if section that we'll do after. So let's put a pin in that. I love that question. And I think we're going to be covering some things that we won't do that today, but I'll show you how you can get that.
Okay, so we'll have some discussion.
Yeah, we'll have some discussions around that. That's a good question. Great. Okay, so who can tell me what's wrong with this so far? Right, we can click on it. We can get a value. What's wrong with this?
It doesn't look like there's a response.
Well, there is a response, right? The value is here. So when I click on these things,
I don't mean it that way. I mean like when
it's not a visual response.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is we need to actually update this. We need to update this UI. Right, now this is something that React does for you that you don't have inside web components. Right, that's important to note. It doesn't re-render because we haven't set, there's nothing in here to tell it to re-render. Right? So there's a very easy way to do this. Let's grab this function that we've got here. Actually, you know what? Let's keep it even simpler. Let's keep it even simpler. We'll say we'll have an update. We'll have an update function. Like this. Okay. I'm going to say this dot buttons for each, loop over all the buttons, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to toggle the class on or off, depending if the value equals the value of the component, right? So we should have a value here, value equals null, right? Put that above, because it's not a private one. So we're going to loop over each time. So this is what this update function will do. It's going to loop over all the buttons that we have here, and it's going to compare each one. Is my value of this component equal to -2? No. Is my value equal to -1? Yes. So what it's going to do is it's going to remove the class of active from this guy, or where it currently is. It's going to add it onto this one. Okay. So we're going to go in this li, const the local value equals li.get attribute data value, like this. Remember, parse int. Right. So we're going to loop over it, and it's going to return -2. I'm going to say if, right, this. Now this refers to the entire component altogether. So we can go this dot value. If this dot value equals the value of the current one that we're looping over, we're going to add the class. li.add class. So class list, sorry. li.class list dot add class, or add, forget exactly which one. It's add. All right, and it's going to be active. Else li.classList dot remove active. It's not currently the one. So let's just recap, right? Loop over all the buttons, emojis, right? If the current li, because remember we're looping, if the current li or the current emoji has the right value, right? Add the class active, right? Otherwise, remove it. So set it back to that opacity. Okay. That's what this update function is going to do. Is update. We should probably say update class, update classes. It's gonna loop over all the buttons that we have and toggle the class on and off depending on what the value of the data value is. Does that make sense? What we've done so far on this? We haven't called it yet. We haven't run this. Does it make sense why we're doing this? Sherry asks, I gather that the code is just searching the buttons and lists with the shadow code only, not the original DOM. That is correct. So see here, Sherry, we say this.shadow query selector. So it's not the entire page, it's just the shadow DOM. That is a great question. And actually, for those who don't know, you can actually select, on any element, right? I can click on this element and go .query selector, and it will only work inside, it will only select things inside here. So you don't always have to do document.query selector. In fact, I don't recommend doing this. Only do this if you don't know where it is on the page. If you do know where it is on the page, make sure you prefix it with this, because this is a lot less expensive, right, than searching the entire website. So that's just a little tip for you. So yes, Sherry, we are just searching the shadow DOM, if that answers your question. Okay, so we've got this update class. We've got to actually call it. So let's call that on when we update this value here. So say this dot update classes. So when we set this value, when we click on something, we want to update the class. So refresh, and magic moment, boom. It is working, team. Pretty cool, right?
Tristan?
Yep.
Can you go to that through that logic again?
Yep.
For this.
So when we're first connecting the page, right? The component, we're adding some styles. We're adding some list items. Now this list items have this data dash value attribute, which has the value of each one, right? Now, when we first create this component, we want to register all the event listeners. Now in React, what you would do is you'd say on click, right? On click equals, then you have some function here and you'd say this dot update or this dot value, right? Equals -2. And then you say this dot update or something, right? We don't have that. We don't have this syntax. This is not JSX. So what we have to do is we have to manually add those event listeners ourselves, right? Register event list, click event listener for all buttons. So it is currently doing that. Now, once we've added this click event listener, once we click on it, right, we're going to grab the li's data value and we update the value, so we know how that works. And we also want to update the classes. So what we do is we go through all the buttons and we loop over each one. And we say, as we're looping, if the current value is equal to the value of this main component that we've just assigned here, right, add the class active. Active making it that full color as opposed to the transparent one. Otherwise, for all the other ones, so let's say we click on -1, right? Remove the active class on all the other ones, because these guys aren't active. We're just active on the -1. So that is what this part here does, is it checks, loops over all of them and says, is it -1? No, remove the class active. Is it -1? Sorry. -1? Is it -1? Yes, it is. So add the class active on this one. So we'll leave that one. Is this -1? No, remove active. Is this -1? No, remove active. Is this -1? No, remove active. So that's what this little function here does. It updates it depending on this data value that we have here, this data value here. That's this update class. Does that answer your question, Rajat?
Yeah, really well. Thanks.
Excellent.
And the update classes, that gets called whenever you click on one of the emojis?
That's right here. Whenever you click on this list item, it's going to update its value according to the data attribute, and it's going to update all the classes.
Okay.
Like this. So that is a really great place, I think, to pause. I'm going to stop for, let's come back at 11:30. I'm just going to pause for a second.
Like a coffee break or something?
Coffee break, yep, come back at 11:30. You can probably stop, you can probably pause the recording, Frankie, just for a sec. Recording. Okay, so just to recap what we've done so far, I'm going to go over everything. So why we're using custom elements is because it allows us to write reusable components that we can just give to someone. It doesn't require frameworks. They're very composable. They're very easy to use. They don't require building things. As you can see, there's no build process for what we're doing. It's very easy, very basic. So you use them by obviously writing them in JavaScript, and then they have to have a dash in the name. That's important. Very, very, very important. You must have a dash to separate yourself. Excuse me. Remember that we're defining it with a class, and then we're extending it from the HTML element, the base HTML element. And then simply down the bottom, we're going windows.customelements.define the name of the element that you want to call it. Remember the dash. Might even put a comment here. Remember the dash. You can have multiple things here, right? You can have smile rating dash Excel, right? Or smile rating dash I don't know, whatever. You can have multiple dashes in there. And then we simply pass the class to register it. Right. So register the custom elements. I apologize about my keyboard team. All the keys are coming off, which is, I spent 5 minutes last night looking for my F key, which is delightful. So if I'm mistyping things, I apologize. Okay, so getting into the component lifecycle and reviewing that, right? We're declaring our variables at the top, right? Declare class properties, top class, right? So the public ones, we also got the private ones, right? So private denotes, underscore, denotes private, not to be accessed outside this code. Right? So someone's looking at your element, they can say, oh, I should not use this property because it's only for this inside here. It's internal. Same with this one, right? Get buttons. Right? So getting a list of all the emojis. Now here's the big one, right? The connect callback. This happens as soon as we put the element on the page. Right? We attach the shadow DOM. So remember what that was. Right? Style encapsulation. Right? It allows us to do some fancy stuff around that. We're writing out our initial template. Right? Assign the initial HTML template. And then once we've assigned that template, we want to set up all of our config and our event listeners. This is our, here we want to set up all event listeners, etc. You might have other things here in a more complex component. And you might decide to break this out into its own setup function or something. Okay, then we have in here, we're looping over each of these buttons. Where when we click on the button, right? When we click on an emoji. And forgive me if there's too many comments here. I just definitely want to make sure you guys understand this. That's why I'm documenting this so much. So for those who are more advanced, you can just remove them. So when we click on a button, right? When we click on an emoji, grab the data value that we see here. Right? Set the value, and then update it. And then this here is add or remove active class on all buttons, depending on the data value in the template, here in the template. Okay, so any questions on anything we've covered on how or why or what that we've done so far?
Tristan, I have a question, please. So we did the parse int on line 63.
Line 63, yes.
Yes, it still works without parse int. So is there a reason we're doing parse int here?
Yes, so we kind of expecting this, if we set this value as a non-parse int, then in here, right, this value would actually be a string. Now, because we're good API developers or good code developers, right, we want to expose this as we want to ensure this is always going to return a number.
Okay, makes sense.
Right. So that's what our promise is to you as the developer of this component, and you're the consumer, is we will always return a number.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question though. All right. Any other questions on what we've done so far and how we do this before we move into the next part? Which brings me to what is our next part. So I gave a bit of a hint earlier today in the break. We haven't got a way of listening to this, do we? Let's say we actually want to use something, this value, respond in some way. We want to actually capture that event. Live share, Dwayne asks. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Start collaborative session. For those who have not used live share, it is a bundle of fun. When it works, it often doesn't. I'm going to put that in the JavaScript advanced channel. For those who are not joined, I highly recommend joining. So that link is there, as is all the code that I've just done today. Okay, so right, we got actually two problems. Let's solve a different one first. What happens if in here, right? This works. I can read the value, right? The value is 0. The value is 2. The value is -2. Right? This works. We understand how this works now. What if I want to set the value externally? What if in here I want to go value equals 2? Well, it doesn't change, does it? Because we've only set this up for a click event to change the value. So what we need to do is change it so that it listens when the value changes. So let's go ahead and do this. Now, at the moment, this is a very basic property. There's no getters or setters on this. Welcome, Folke. So we're going to update this to use a slightly different format, a different pattern. I'm actually going to turn this into a private variable. I'm going to go get value. This is now the public value, the public variable. Return value. This dot value like this. I'm going to go set value, which takes in a number or value. And we want to go this dot value equals parse int the v that we pass in. So what I've just done is exactly what we had with this, right? This format, this is the one we had before, but now I'm adding a little bit more complexity to this, right? Because now what I can do is I have greater control over what we're getting and what we're setting, right? So set up property with getter setter for greater control. Right? You'll see here what this greater control actually entails. Right? Who can tell me now how to fix the problem that we've had, where when we click on this, when we set it here, it doesn't change the value? Who can tell me what to do here? I'll give you a hint. We've already solved this problem down here. Who can tell me?
So basically, when you're setting, you need to also update on the DOM.
Update the classes. We already have a function for this, don't we?
Yep.
So why don't we take this guy, take him out? We'll actually put him right here. So whenever we set the value from wherever it is, it's always, always, always going to update the classes. Sounds pretty good to me. What do you guys think? Let's try it. So if I click, it should work. It does. Now if I come in here and I set the value to -2, it also works. Pretty cool, right? What if I set it to -20? What happens? Do we like this behavior, team? That it just disappears like this? Do we think that's a good idea?
I think it should silently ignore it.
Silently ignore it. Right? Maybe it shouldn't. Maybe it should give us some kind of message and say, hey, you can't do that. You can't set that value. Right? So maybe an in-between is a nice warn statement. You can say, if value is smaller, this dot value is smaller than -2, console or this dot value is larger than 2, so it's out of bounds, right? We want to warn. Console.warn value should be between -2 and 2. We might just prefix it with a smile rating. So now let's try it. -20. Did not set value. Oh, that's right, because I need to select it first. Select it in the DOM. There you go. Value should be between 2 and -2. And for those fancy pantsers out there who say, actually, I don't want to silently ignore it. I want to actually throw an error or something. You could throw an error here. You'd say throw new error. Try that again. There you go. It's pretty nice, isn't it? Or maybe we don't even allow you to set it. We'll say, we'll throw this error and we'll say, maybe we don't. There's multiple ways you can handle this as a developer. You might actually decide to do something more like this, right? I'll actually comment this. We'll say if this dot value is smaller than 2, right? This dot value equals -2. We just don't allow you to. If you set it to -20, it automatically just sets it back to -2. So or you might decide to do it the error way. I personally am probably going to do this in combination with a warning. So log console warn. So that's really up to you as the developer, what you would like to do. I personally like this idea, is that it handles it for you, so it doesn't create any introduce weird bugs, and it tells you, it warns you. So now in here, if I refresh, if I set it to -20, right? The value, you can actually see it's been set to -2. So it's just a nice way of interacting with your component. So it's up to you whether you want to use the error, whether you do want to rewrite the value. It's up to you. That's what I'm deciding to do. It makes sense so far, team? How many of you have questions on this so far, or anything we've covered? All right, you're all following. I love it. As soon as I say that, there's a question. Excellent. Is it going to warn each time? Yes, it will. So anytime we update this value, all right, let's say we equals 200. Sorry, equals, not minus, equals 200. Equals 99. Equals -1,000,000. Right? So if I set it to beyond that, so if I set it to 2, for example, it's not going to throw an error. Oh, shouldn't. Thank you. That's right. That's a good point. Thank you for that. So let's refresh. If I set this to 2, there we go. So no warning on that one. If I set it to 3, well, maybe not. Let's let's say this is V. We'll put this up in front. Because we were rewriting it, so it wasn't invalid by the end of it. Let's try that again. 3, 2, 1, -2, -3. There we go. That's what we expect. Thanks, Sherry. Okay.
What was going wrong there?
So what was happening is we were actually rewriting the value, and then because we were rewriting the value, it was never going to log that stuff because it was always correct. So we do it before, and then we rewrite the value.
Okay.
Another way of doing this is to check v, but I want to make sure that it's an int first. So that's just how that little thing is working. Okay. What else? What else do you guys need to know? So we haven't added any event listeners to this. So let's in here, let's have some JavaScript, right? I'm gonna say we'll have a results. We want to say document.querySelector smile rating, right? Dot add event listener. Change const rating equals the change. So rating dot add event listener on change. And we want to say we'll also have the results. Query selector dot results. And here we just want to say results dot inner HTML equals you clicked, you rated this, and we'll just pass in the exact value. So rating dot value. This. So whenever we click on something outside, this is outside the component team. This is outside the component. So whenever we click on one of these things, we want to have something underneath that says you clicked -2, you clicked 0, you clicked 2. We want that to show underneath. But currently, we don't have this event listener. It's not doing anything, is it? It's sending out any new values. This change event. So how do we fix that? Well, firstly, before I talk about how do we fix it, let's think about the architecture. Where do we fix this? Who can tell me? How many of you have ideas about this now?
Kristen, what was the question? I got lost.
Yeah, so we want to have a way of knowing outside the component when we've changed it. Right? This is what we want. This option doesn't exist right now. Right?
What's the option? Is it the change event?
Yeah, so this change event doesn't exist. It's like what you do in an input field, right? If you have an input field, right? I go document.querySelector, right? Input. We get the input field. We go .add event listener, change. Then here we go to the event. We go log e.target.value. So whenever we change something inside the input field, right, it automatically updates here. See? We want to do this for our component. So whenever we click on one of these things, it actually does something. We can hook into it. Volker has to leave. Thanks, mate. Talk to you soon.
See you later.
Maybe join us for a coding party later today.
Oh yeah, what time is that?
I don't know. What time do you want it to be?
Oh, whatever. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Yeah.
See you, mate. So that's the functionality that we want. Let's say somebody else wrote the smile component, the smile rating, but we want to use it. As Una said, I want to send this data to Excel, right? So where in our code do we need to tell or create an event to tell us that something has changed? Where in this code do we do that? Where do you guys think?
So
the update classes, man?
Update classes? Maybe.
the on click, right? When you click it, you want to
Then
trigger the
the on
change.
click, maybe the on click, but what happens if we change it manually? What if we go 0.value equals -2? We want it to happen there too, don't we?
Did you create something where you have some function where you're changing the value? Can I see the JavaScript file again? So if you scroll up, there's this thing set value. So that's that's a property you created, a function you created.
So Sherry says on change. That's what we're making, Sherry. We're making our own on change. There currently isn't an on change. So we're actually defining our own on change. Now Shane, yep. So Susie has the $1 million answer on the set value. This is where we will do it. Right here. Whenever the value changes, we want to send out a custom event and say, hey, we have a changed value. So I will show you how to what we call dispatch, right? Send out your own custom event. Now, thanks to the fact that we are automatically extending from HTML element, we have access to this. We do it like this. Watch carefully, right? Notify that we have changed. Okay, this dot dispatch event. Okay, well, this is a function. Now we have to define the event. We have to create a custom event. So let's do that. New custom event. We call this one. Now it takes in a type. So what is the event that we're listening to, team?
A click.
Is it a click?
Change, right?
Change.
It's a change. It's a change. We've changed the value. Remember the input field, right? We've changed the value. So this is what we're doing. Change. We're creating our own one. And that's it. That's all you do. It's pretty cool, right?
Interesting. Can you just remind me, how does the set value tie into this? How does set value get called?
So in two places, right? The first one is when we click on something. We add the event listener. So we set the value here.
Okay, so you click on it, it sets the value. Okay.
So that's the first one. The second one could be outside. So something else actually changes this value. So inside JavaScript, we come in here, right? We go 0.value equals 300. 3,000.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
And it resets it. So that's the second place. So when you're building components team, you have to think about where and how it's going to be used. Same in React. Where and how it's going to be used. So this allows us to create that custom event. So whenever we change a value, doesn't matter where it's been changed from, it's just whenever we change it, dispatch this event. That's it. That's all we need to do. It's very easy.
I have a question. How does the event know what to trigger?
How does the event know?
So right here, you said dispatch event, right? And it says change. But how does the inside your HTML know that this dispatch is referring to the one in HTML?
This one in HTML? I'm not following.
Yeah, can you go back to the HTML document that you were? Yeah, you says right here, it says query selector input change.
Forget this.
So not that one, sorry, the one on the top. Yeah, the rating one.
Yep.
how does that link to the dispatch event? Like, what if I have two of those? What if I have two of those components?
Yeah, so because I've already selected this one, this is going to select the first one.
Right.
So if you had two smile ratings on the page, it would,
okay, yeah, okay, I get it now. Thanks.
Yeah, cool. Good question though.
Interesting. I just actually I'm curious about that one. So if you have two smile ratings, would you need to add like an ID to each one to identify them?
There's many ways. So you could use an ID. You could use a nth child, right? You could do last of type. All the CSS selectors that you have. There's this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but to think about it, how do we select a second one of these without any extra information, or with information? If you do an ID, right? So ID, smile, rating 2. We could do smile rating nth of type 2. We could do smile rating. This is a tricky one. Smile rating plus smile rating. What that will do is it will select any smile rating that comes after another smile rating. Now, keep in mind with this strategy, if you had 3 of them, like this, then this one here would actually select the last 2, because you've got one that comes before, and you've got another one that comes like that. So that's just a little bit on CSS. Susie asks, if we created the value as a private, doesn't it need to be called as this.value inside the click event and the update class method? Why calling without the underscore works? I don't quite understand your question, Susie.
Can we see this is with the JavaScript? Okay, but there's no underscore for the actual getter and setter.
That's because these guys are public. So we want this to be exposed publicly. We want people to interact with this. But this one, we don't. Because...
Okay, but my question is about the update classes method and the this buttons for each. When we add the click event on both of them, we're calling the value just without the underscore, just this.value.
Yep.
And why does it work? Don't we need the underscores?
No, because remember, we've got a getter and we have a setter. So when I say, and this is the part of the magic of getters and setters, right? See how you've got these two things here? The get and set?
Yeah.
These are functions that automatically get called. So whenever I do, let me start with a simple example. In JavaScript. This is a good thing for you guys to know, right? Class foobar. Now, if we have a get, right, foo, we can return anything, right? Anything we want, foo. We have a set foo, right, which always takes a value. A setter always has a value. We can do something, right? Now here, if we go const foobar, new foobar. If I go foobar dot foo, right, just as a statement alone, right, no reassignment. This is going to access this variable, and it will automatically call this. However, if I assign it, if I go foobar, right, dot foo equals 1, 2, 3, right, this is going to call the set foo with the value of 1, 2, 3.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
So that's how getters and setters work. That's an important concept to understand. this we'll call get foo.
Hey, Tristan, could you wrap that, just kind of clarify it completely with having a private foo variable that gets setted and returned?
Yep, totally. So let's say, let's rename this to person. We'll give it a bit more, less abstract. Person has a name. All right. Call it John. So initially he's called John. All right. Now if we set the name, this is where this private variable comes in. Right? We have to, if we want to actually interact between these two, we have to have some way, we have to have something to interact with. So that's where we have a private variable. So here, we're just going to return this dot name, like that, a private, right? This dot name, it's private. And then set, we say this dot name equals v. Now, let me be clear. If this is all you were doing, you wouldn't do this. You would just do this. Because you're not doing anything. But if, right, if you want to do something here, then we need this, right, to actually update, like this dot update something.
Just
yeah.
So if instead of underscore name we call it like if we refactor it and call it name2, then the getters and setters will also have to be called name2, or it
No.
can just...
No. So I could call this, right, some random thing.
Okay, now it's more clear what is getting called. Yeah.
It's a good question. No, they don't have to link. You can return anything you want from a getter. You can do any. You can return, right? Return 1, 2, 3. We'll always return the same thing. So this is how getters and setters work in the context. This is probably a good lesson for you guys, actually, if you're not familiar with it. All right, set name. I'll add this to our Slack channel. There you go. Any other questions on getters and setters? If you come from a Java background or a C background, this is a very common thing to do with classes. This is what...
I think it's also familiar in Ruby on Rails too.
Yeah, this was what we would call, right, object-oriented programming, called OOP. Object-oriented. This class is an object. Getters and setters. This is object-oriented programming.
And somebody mentioned that they're learning Java at the beginning, and they mentioned encapsulation.
Yeah.
This private variable, not being able to access it from other classes. That is encapsulation. You're hiding. You're hiding what's happening in this class from other classes, and then you're controlling how other classes interact with those properties.
That is correct. Exactly where I'm confused. Excellent, Tan. Do you have any other questions, Tan, on that? I want to make sure this is very clear before we move forwards. I don't want anyone to be confused about anything that we've covered so far. Not anymore. Excellent. A little bit of enlightenment for today. Good stuff, guys. So let's just have a look where we're at. Where are we? So now I think we've added this onChange, right? Dispatched this event. We've added the onChange listener down here, right? So we're selecting this smile ready. Let's get rid of these other ones. We're selecting the smile rating, and then we're setting the inner HTML of the results. The results is just a standard div. There's nothing fancy going on there. So let's see if it works. I'll remove that input field as well. All right. Boom. Look at that. Pretty cool. What if we set the value manually from inside code? 3,000, which should jump up to 2. There you go. And it warns us. That's pretty cool, team. That's pretty cool. I'd say that's almost job done for a simple web component like this. What are some styling things you guys might think of? Can you guys see my cursor? I don't know if you can actually see my cursor. Cursor. Before, just as I was saying it, Susie. I love Susie because she's always telling me to use my cursor pointer, and that is exactly what we're going to do with this, Susie. So you read my mind.
Also making the emojis larger.
Yep. Yep. Larger. She's already changed hers. All right, great. So let's actually think about how do we style this. We might actually be able to do something very simple with font size. So I'm going to go in here and just go into styles and just go font size, because emojis are fonts, right? Font size, let's say 300 pixels. Maybe it's a bit too much. 100 pixels. There you go. Look at that. We didn't even need to do any custom stuff, right? That's the beauty of these web components. That's just automatic. So you can set that font size yourself. Right? Now this isn't very nice. I can select it like this. Who knows how to turn this off? Can anybody tell me this CSS property that we use to disable text selection? Anybody know for the CSS wizards out there? I'll give you a second to Google it. First person gets a prize. I don't have a prize. Just kidding. But first person.
I believe it's called selectable.
Nope.
No.
It's a CSS property. Who can tell me? I'm not going to tell you guys until someone gives the correct answer. I want you guys to find out.
Is it visibility?
No, it's not. So visibility actually hides and shows it. So I click on this and I go visibility, hidden, disappears. It is not the same as display none, because see how here it's actually still, like, everything else still stays in the same position. Whereas display none, right? Display none actually takes it out of the DOM. Watch what happens. See how everything shifts? Whereas visibility hidden just hides it. But good try.
Is it user select?
It is user select none. Good team. Who was the first one? Dennis. Well done, Dennis.
It's a tie.
It's a tie. Good stuff, team. Good stuff, guys. All right, so that's exactly what we're going to use. We're going to use user select none. We're going to go through into our CSS that we had. And we're going to go. Now here, right, you actually have a little bit of an extra thing inside web component shadow DOM. You have a thing called the root, or the shadow root. I think in our case, we're just going to use the root. Now the root, right, specified with the colon root, refers to the actual shadow root here, this guy. I'm pretty sure it's root. There might be another word for it. We'll try that in a sec. So we're going to go user select none. I cannot select it. Okay, so it wasn't root. It must be. Oh, what's the other one? I always forget this one. Web component root CSS. It's not component. It's something else. Where are we? There's a specific post. That's the one. Post. And there we go. It's no longer selectable. I can click on it, but I can't select it. I can't. If I go Command A, that doesn't get selected. And then the last one I need to do is the cursor pointer. And I'd say, team, you know what? Let's do a little extra thing. I like to, as a user experience, I like to have some kind of state, because the cursor pointer is good, but I also like to have some kind of state. So what I'm going to do is when I hover over something, we're going to increase the opacity just a little bit. So by default, it's set to 0.4. On the hover, I'm going to increase it to 0.5, just a little bit, just to give that feedback system. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's very faint, but it's enough as a user to go, oh, cool. Maybe you make it a little bit, 6. Yeah, I like that. Boom. In fact, if you want to get really fancy, you know what we could do is we could go, all right, li hover and li.active. Transform scale. This is getting into some fancy stuff now. Let's scale it by 5%. Now, if I hover over it, I don't know if you guys can see that. It's getting, we'll make it a little bit bigger by 10%. See how it's just that little bit bigger than the other ones. You see that? Just that little bit bigger.
Yeah, it's cool. It just kind of pops.
Yeah, it just pops up. And then the last finishing touch, right, is we're going to add a little bit of a transition. Transition, we'll say 0.2 seconds. 0.2 seconds. So just that little bit of a, this is the really small details, team, that just puts the icing on the cake. Just that little bit. It's not as a harsh jump. It's just a little bit of that. I don't know if you can see this. Just that smooth in and out, as opposed to a harsh jump. And there we go. In fact, I don't like the transition on the click. I want that to snap. So what I'm going to do is just make the transition only apply to transform. Right. There we go. I like that. What do you guys think? Pretty good?
That's cool.
And that's pretty much it, team. For 12:15, that's 2 hours on the dot. That's pretty much, there's a lot more I could delve in with you guys. You know, there's things like the slot that we spoke about, actually putting content inside web components from outside of it. We can talk about like different CSS things and attribute changes. Like we haven't even got into custom attributes on this stuff. You know, we can definitely, I can run a part 2 of this next week if you guys want, if it's interesting. Otherwise we can do something else. But I want to keep it short today with you guys. I'm going to turn off my screen sharing. This will all be on GitHub. So I will post a link to that. In fact, I'll do that now. I'll, just while I'm at it.
So Tristan, for what you do, whenever you click it, we're just displaying out on the screen, right? But with this event listener, you're just displaying what's clicked.
That's correct.
You know, we could really do anything with that. You know, put it to send it to a file or send it to an external database.
Yep. Do the Excel spreadsheet that Una was talking about.
Yeah, you can keep a record in the Excel. You can really I think if we can get this from GitHub, we could play around with it ourselves and
init commit.
It's a good starting point, right?
Yeah, it's a great starting point. Let's just create a little basic README for this as well, for those who are new to this. readme.md, right? Call it a smile rating component, right? We'll have the smile, these guys. Just a little bit of a README, show people exactly how your web component works.
Hey Tristan, there's a question from Neil. And I have my own thought on this one. Let me know what you think about my thought. Right? So his question is there a way to write the CSS in a different file and then import it into the custom elements, right? So just my thought for that, if you have the element all contained within the JS file, is that better for passing it around? Or does it make a difference because you have a CSS file as well?
Yes. So there's a lot of ways to do this. I did not want to delve into the complexities. So Eunice says, if there'll be a part 2, I'd like to see the whole export process. What do you mean by the export process, you know?
Hi, Tristan. I'm really new at this. I'm just wondering if there's a way for me to actually see the results in Excel and how I can map that out.
That would actually require delving into Excel's API. That's a complex question.
Okay.
That's kind of out of scope for what we're doing today. Delving into Excel.
Or can I look it up somewhere?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it. Like, would that be useful for everybody? Like, I'm curious as to what people are interested in, because if it is useful, we can certainly do this. But I'm just curious to know what people, not Excel.
Tristan, I'm trying to understand what would be really a use case for Excel, right? Because technically we are seeing the results right on this page, right?
Yeah. So I think it is, I think it is a pretty specific use case to what you're doing. That said, right, I still want to point you in the right direction. So Excel actually has some really good APIs. So I'd use Sheets, so Google Sheets APIs. So I would have a look at this. Have a gander through some of this stuff. If you just go add row, right? There'll be so many examples of this stuff, and you could definitely hook that up with this.
Okay,
in fact,
thank you.
You know what you could even do is you could even have your component take in an attribute, smile rating, right? And then you could say sheet ID equals, and you can pass in the Google Sheet ID like this. And then whenever you change it, right, in here, in your dispatch event, you could also have send to sheet, right? Whatever, and you could handle that yourself.
Okay, thank you so much.
That is absolutely something you could do.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Cool. I'm just going to finish up this little thing. Example: web components built with HTML and CSS. That's pretty much it. Yeah, I'm going to push this up on the Git. Feature of docs added README. Of course, we need to actually create the GitHub repository. Let's create new. I'll call it webinar web component. Right. sample or example web component.
The spelling of component in the
yes, thank you. Thank you. Review smiles. Public. And then grab this guy, put him here, git remote, add origin. Push. And that's today. That's pretty much it, team. What's up? There it is. That's it. Any other questions or things you guys are curious about? Anything you want to see in particular next week that we should start planning for?
Yeah, we got a couple suggestions on the chat. I'm just saying I'm going to log those 2 questions in the JavaScript Advanced channel, so you'll see I just pop them in there. So yeah, give us those suggestions on Slack, and during the week, Tristan, yeah, you can pick up.
Yeah, I actually put them in the general